Welcome back. So you should have your DB browser for SQL installed, and you should also have Notepad++ installed. So if we take a look at the application, okay, you can see we have a number of tabs: the database structure. We can look at the data, and of course there's no database in there and there's no data, so there's nothing to look at. And when we're ready to actually execute SQL commands, we have another tab over here for execute SQL. Now, before I actually start using an application, I like to do some preliminary configuration. I like to make the fonts a little bit bigger because the fonts tend to be really tiny. If you go into Edit, it's usually in the Edit menu, might be in the View menu. Just go through the menus and look for Preferences, Options, Settings, anything like that. And we found the Preferences for this application. And let's see, don't change too much here at this point. All we want to do is we want to make the fonts, the size of the letters, a comfortable size. So we can see the font size for the browser is really small. Let's make that a little bit bigger, 12. Okay, so that's on the browser. And for the SQL, again, really tiny fonts. So on the editor, I want my fonts to be at least 12, maybe 14. We'll leave it for 12 for now, and we'll see what that looks like. And the output goes to a results window. Okay, so again, that's really small, so let's bump that up to 12 as well. There are other things that we can change here, like colors and everything else, but I recommend you leave it as it is for now until you become more familiar with this tool. The only thing we really need to do is set the font size so we're able to read it. So let me click Save, and you can do the same thing with Notepad++, but here's a little trick. To make the font bigger or smaller, you hold the Control key down and you press the plus or minus sign. So I have my finger on the Control key, and here I am making it smaller, and now I'm making it larger. However, if you want, you can do the same thing here. You can go in and find the configuration. It's either settings or preferences. There it is. And you can change the size of the fonts here. But I find it just easier holding down the Control key and doing plus minus. Well, I guess we're ready to do some work now. So let's take the first bit of code here, and you can follow along yourself. So we're going to create a table, and we're going to call it students, and we only have, let me push everything else out of the way because it can be really distracting. Okay, so just recall this green part here is a comment. It's not executed by the SQL language. And the way you start a comment is with this /*, and don't forget to end it as well. If you ever see anything like this, notice my command here turned green. Okay, it's because I forgot to end the comment. So don't forget to have the */ to end the comment as well. So that's one thing I don't like about this particular language. You have to do more keystrokes than necessary to enter things. But what is nice about SQL is the simplicity of it. What are we doing here? We're creating a table. What's the name of the table? Students. And what are the columns? Well, we have two columns. We have one called name for the student name and email address, and they're both text data fields. They're both text columns, but in this version of SQL, okay, there's more than one type of text that's supported. This type of text is called variable char. Don't let the name throw you off. It's just plain old text, and it can be up to 128 characters. So if you have a student and his name is more than 128 characters, then you're going to have to shorten his name to be able to get it in the database. Now, this 128 is standard. You can't choose here. You cannot make it, let's say, 100 characters long. It has to be a standard 128. Okay, and we have a lot of flexibility with the syntax. Just to recall from last week, some people put everything all in one line. Okay, their brain just somehow processes it better when it's all in one line. Some people break it up, so you want to kind of set this up in a way that looks good to your eyes. Okay, so if I press enter here, oops, no, let's come back and press the enter key. Okay, you can see here we have the name and the email columns or fields. We also call them fields or columns. Remember, a column is up and down, and we have them all on one line, or if you prefer, you can put them across two lines. Now, wherever you have an open bracket, you have a closed bracket. Now, some versions of SQL, you need to end with a semicolon. These are the small differences between Microsoft Access and SQL Server, and these are very tiny variations in the language. In this case, you don't need the semicolon. You're going to open it up and close it, okay, indicating these are the fields, and you're going to have open close brackets indicating the number of bits. So let's go ahead and copy this into our SQLite. So we'll come here where it says executing SQL. So let's go ahead and paste that right in. Oops, forgot to create a new database. So let's click on New Database. Okay, and we'll just call this a review. So this is a review of last week. Okay, review of weekend 1. Give it any meaningful name you want. I also recommend taking out those spaces. Okay, don't leave spaces in things if you don't really need them there, and you'll find it makes the programming, when we start integrating it all together using Python and SQL, you'll find those spaces can be a bit of a headache. So I'm taking out those spaces. I'm going to click on my desktop, create a new folder here. We'll call it Databases. We're in the database course. Okay, click on it and click Save. Okay, and there it is. We have now just created a table. Now it's asking me here, do I want to change the table, edit it, make any changes? You can go ahead and close that window. Okay, and if you take a look over here, there's no table. So let's go ahead and run this again. I may have made a small mistake here. I may have clicked cancel when I needed to actually click OK. So we'll run our a command again. So we come up here, we click the blue button, and here we see an error in the execution at line 1. So let's go ahead and take a look here to find out exactly what went wrong. And if I look here, there's a little clue there. Notice that there's a minus sign. When I collapse and expand it, okay, so let me collapse it again. Notice the email field is kind of left out of the create table statement. So that's the first thing we have to go ahead and try to fix. I'm going to hit backspace here, and I'm going to see if I can fix this now. So let's go ahead and run it again, and this time it accepted it. So the way the data is actually put in here does make a small difference. So you just look down at the output window, and you see the results. So this time it did create the table. Let's go ahead and look at the database structure, and sure enough, we have one table in there, and when I expand it, I see that there's a name column and an email column, and they are text fields, or they are varchar data types. So there we go. We just created our first table, and if I click Browse Data, you can see email. Now I can resize here because a name can be really long, an email address can be really long. Okay. If we have many fields here for the student, you'll see there's a scroll bar down here. Okay. And right now there is no data. Okay, so that's the next step here. We need to start putting data in our database. So when we go and look at the command for that, we see we have the insert into students table. And where are we going to insert? We're going to insert into the following two fields, name and email. And we're going to insert values for Andy, his name, and of course, the school that he's in. So let's go ahead and copy this and go to the execute window here. Again, if this window here is too small for you, if the text is too small, you can go to edit, preferences, and you can increase the size of your font. So I think 12 is a little bit on the small side. I'm going to see if I can make that maybe just a touch bigger. Let's do 16 and maybe 14 for the output window down here. Let's click save, and you can see the font is a little bit more comfortable now. So let's paste in our code for inserting into the students table. And what are we going to insert? We're going to insert values for Andy, his name and his email address. So let's go ahead and execute this command. And again, we have an error message. So it's not the end of the world. We just have to look through the error message and try to determine exactly what it is we did wrong here. And it looks like there is nothing really wrong. I just simply, when you copy and paste it for whatever reason, it didn't like the information that I put in there. So I'm just going to put a space in there, press enter, and then when you click run, you see it executes without errors. So let's go ahead and browse our data, and we have the first piece of information in there. We have Andy's name, and we have his email address. Well, guess what? We can do it right from the browse data tab. If you look carefully, if you hover your button or your mouse cursor over this button here, it will say insert a new record. So let's go ahead and do that. So it says null. There's currently no data in there. Let's insert something for Mary. And I'm going to do this really quickly. So at school.ca, okay, just so you get an idea, press enter, insert a new record, okay, Jeff for his name, and of course his email address is jeff@school.ca. Oh, oops, let's do that again. Okay, jeff.ca. And of course, we're learning SQL, so it's nice to have all these tools to add a new row or record to our database or delete, but we really need to learn this language here. So let's add in a couple of more records in here, okay, for our students. And you can just go ahead, type it out all manually, or you can just simply modify the code as you have it here. So we'll put in the name Jerry, and his email address is jerry@school.ca. Again, execute your command, take a look down here, see if there are any errors, okay, and then when you click Browse Database, you'll see we now have 4 records or rows in our table. So again, to quickly review, the rows are called records. That's Andy's record, Mary's record, Jeff, and so on. The columns are called fields, okay? And the whole thing is called a table.